So after we have gone through the factor affecting bioavailability, which is the physical chemical property of the drug, okay, of the drugs, which they affect disintegration and dissolutions, or formulation factor, both affecting also disintegration, dissolution, and stability. Okay, here come the physiological factor, the third factor, which governing the absorption of drugs into the blood. Okay, talking about the absorption of drugs, if you still remember in our second lecture when we discussed about the mechanism of drug absorption, okay, which can be divided into paracellular or transcellular. Okay, paracellular means the absorption of drug going through in between the cell. Okay, this is a cell. Okay, transcellular means when you have the cell like this and they pass through the cell. Okay, so in paracellular absorption mechanism, they go through the gaps, okay, or pores between the cell, and usually this is happen for urea and water, which is a small molecule, as the gap between the cell is quite small. Okay, however, when you talk about the transcellular, it is passing through the membrane, and as we know, most of the membrane, not most, all membrane are lipophilic in nature. So we expect the drug to be lipophilic or hydrophobic. Okay, and it should be unionized for perfect absorptions. Okay, so this is an example of showing you that if there is a hydrophobic molecule, they will be passing through the membrane easier as compared to the hydrophilic molecule, which doesn't pass through the membrane. So similarly, when you have non-ionized drug, they will be easily passed through the cell for therapeutic action, and whereas when you have ionized drug, they will not be passing through the membrane of a cell. So when we talk about the transcellular mechanism, so they go through the cell, hence the biological membrane. Okay, and the main mechanism, as you still remember, is the passive diffusion. Okay, we have also active transport, facilitated transport, if you still recall. Okay, so here is the schematic of the mechanism of drug absorptions, transmembrane. Okay, transcellular, which include diffusion, passive diffusion, facilitated diffusion, and active transport. Okay, so talking about the transcellular, okay, the absorption passing through the cell, hence the biological membrane, and the main mechanism as previously stated. And in active transport, when energy is involved, and usually they can be saturated. Okay, example of drug that they can pass through using this active transport is vitamin B, B1, B2, B3, B6. Okay, whereas facilitated diffusion, carrier can be also saturated, no energy involved, and they are not against concentration gradient. So one of the example is B12. Okay, and of course we have also pinocytosis, endocytosis, exocytosis, and usually they are the mechanism for large molecule or some peptide, which is a big molecule of some particles. Okay, so this is the example of the diagram showing endocytosis. So after the brief recap about the mechanism of drug absorption, okay, if you still remember, we are here talking about the factor affecting bioavailability. Alright, okay, if the disintegration is the rate limiting process, then the bioavailability will be affected by physical chemical property of the drug as well as formulation of the drugs. Alright, and if the dissolution is rate limiting step, it is also mainly the bioavailability will be mainly affected by physical chemical property of the drugs as well and the formulation of the drugs. Okay, and if both of this is not limited, okay, it's not a rate limiting step, okay, and the rate limiting step is like in absorptions, okay, then if the absorption is rate limiting, bioavailability is no longer governed by physical chemical properties of the formulations. Let's say you are given a drug which they have a problem in drug absorptions. So anything that you change to the particle size, to the physical chemical property, to the formulation that you add in any disintegrant, any lubricant, any things that is enhance the dissolution, you were not going to change the bioavailability of the drugs. Okay, so when you are trying to design a formulation, you have to see which is the rate limiting step that affecting the ultimate bioavailability of the drugs. Let's say there's an example of you, okay, who drive a car, okay, to your friend's house to attend his or her wedding. Okay, and for example, the outcome, if to quickly go to the wedding, all right, okay, let's say you are in the in your car, all right, so what determine your outcome, which is quickly go to the wedding, and here is the house of your friend who have the wedding. Okay, and what is the factor that affecting you? First is the speed of driving, right? Okay, second, is there any jam, any other car here that causes the traffic? Okay, if there is, then it will delay your time to your friend's house. Okay, what is the third factor that may affect your arrival, which is, let's say you have arrived here, okay, this is you have arrived here with your car, all right, this is you with your car, and while you need to turn in, okay, if you have the road which is wide enough, okay, so 2 cars can go in at the same time or 3 can go in at the same time. But if your road is very narrow, okay, for example, you go to a kampong, suddenly the road is being cut down to very narrow, so it will still hurdle or delay your arrival. Okay, so this is the third factor that affecting your arrival to the friend house. And what is the final factor? The final one is upon you arrive the kampong, is there any guard house that would like to verify your identity? Okay, they will stop you at the guard house and can you please present your IC, and you write down your the house that you would like to visit, and all this will take time, and again it will delay your arrival. Okay, we will use this example for you to remember what are the factors affecting bioavailability of a drug. If you still remember our example of you attending your friend's wedding in a house, okay, so the physiological factor that affecting the arrival of this you in your house friend's house, it will be the GI transit time. Okay, the first one. So assuming that yourself is a drug, okay, what is the GI transit time? The speed of the drug passing through the GI. Alright, and is there any other food that affecting the presence of the drug? Okay, so is there any food that affecting the presence of the drug or delivery of the drug through the GI? Okay, and the third one will be the absorption window, is equivalent to the the road size of your friend's house. For example, it is a narrow road or is it wide enough. Okay, so the absorption window is simply meaning that when there is a drug coming into your intestinal area, okay, absorption window means let's say you have drug A with a narrow absorption window, means only a certain area of the GI tract can absorb the drugs. Okay, any other than that cannot. Okay, but if you have a normal drug that without a narrow absorption window, they can absorb anywhere in the GI tract, along the GI tract. Okay, and the last one, the last factor will be intestinal barrier, like what I told you about the guard house. Alright, they are guarding your biological system. There are some protein existing at the membrane or inside the cell that they are trying to guard your biological system from any foreigner drug molecule. Let's go into more detail in the physiological factor of GI transit time. So talking about GI transit time, it is related to the time taken by the drug to pass through the gastrointestinal tract. So the time taken to pass through the gastrointestinal tract, and it is divided into two processes, which is the stomach and intestine. Alright, and if you are aware that the intestine, they have what you call higher surface area than the stomach, so the absorption mainly happen in intestine. Okay, so let's say we have the T1 here, we have the T2 here. So anything that actually fasten T1 and T2 will cause an increase in absorption. Okay, so fasten T1 and T2 means you have a very low T1 and low T2 because it is time. So you have a very short time for T1 and T2, then they will reach the intestine. When they reach the intestine in a big amount, let's say in a big amount, so this amount of drug is ready for absorption. So you will achieve a better absorption. Okay. So we sum up the T1 and T2 as gastric emptying time. Okay, so if we have like T12, right, T12 gastric emptying time as short as possible, then they will reach the intestine, all right, and available for absorption. Okay, so if you look at this experiment, when they examine the stomach emptying time, which is the shorter stomach emptying time, okay, then you will have the higher peak plasma of acetaminophen. Acetaminophen is also paracetamol. Okay, and the relationship is almost linear, and when you have a longer stomach emptying time, means they take a longer time for T1 and longer time for T2, then the absorption is reduced. Okay, so the peak concentration of PCM also reduced. Okay, so here we further explain in words. So stomach mainly for digestion, and small intestine is the major absorption site due to the high surface area, whereas large intestine is used for storage of semi-solid fecal material. And in general, drugs that are better absorbed in the small intestine because of the larger surface of the area than stomach. Okay, therefore quicker stomach emptying time will increase the drug absorption, as I have mentioned just now. So any factor that they can slow down the stomach emptying rate, which is T12 is the time, okay, and the stomach emptying rate, okay, may prolong the onset of drug action and also reduce the therapeutic efficacy. Okay, and when we talk about intestinal transit time, a drug must have sufficient resident time in the small intestine, okay, for absorption to take place. So intestinal transit time is unlike gastric emptying time. Okay, as if we can have the intestinal transit time longer, then we will have a better absorption. Okay, so increased motility of the intestine. Okay, for example, this is happened in diarrhea. It will shorten the transit time in the intestine, okay, and lead to the low absorption. So in diarrhea case, that the intestinal transit time is reduced. Okay, so you have the reduce in absorption. All right, so in that case, we will crush the tablet and give as a solution or suspension in order to speed up the absorption. All right, okay, and the GIT transit time can be determined by using gamma scintigraphy technique. So in research, how we actually determine the transit time is by using gamma scintigraphy technique. Okay, this is example of gamma scintigraphy technique when a drug is being tagged to something like fluorescent color. Okay, then you can actually track the drug's position. Okay, so this is the human here that they sit in this machine and being captured here. Okay, and the drugs go in and they reach the stomach. Okay, and slowly they pass through the duodenum. Okay, and slowly to the intestine, slowly to move around in the in the intestine and go to the large intestine. So upon the time that they leave, okay, the stomach, this is the gastric emptying time. So the time taken for them from here, from 1 to 2, it will be gastric and emptying time. So for the time that they start the journey from here, going down, okay, up to the large intestine, okay, it will be the intestinal transit, okay, the time that's taken to stay in the intestinal, okay. And this is again the example of gamma scintigraphy technique, okay. You can see that the molecule, they move, okay, eventually out from the body, okay, they go move eventually out from the body. This is the summary of the transit time of food in stomach, small intestine and large intestine. Okay, generally for liquid it takes around 30 minutes to stay in the stomach, okay, and the solid food it takes about 2 hours to stay in the stomach. By knowing this, what is the implication of taking medicines when you can advise your patients? For example, your patient forget a pill that should be taken in the noontime and they have taken the lunch. So what you should advise? You can advise them to take the pill 2 hours after the lunch if the pill is meant to be taken in empty stomach, okay. But however, for anything that is to be taken in an empty stomach condition, you should take the pill before lunch, okay. And for small intestine, most of your drugs or the solid food, they will stay in the small intestine for, sorry, spelling error, 3 hours, all right. And for large intestine, it can stay up to 24 hours. Okay, next let's go into the factor of food that can affect bioavailability. So let's talk about how food can affect absorption of drugs. For example, when you have a tablet, okay, and you're given the tablets and you ingest it with a bowl of rice, okay, and as you know, food, you need digestion, okay, time, okay, and it stay in the stomach for around 2 hours, okay. So the time taken for the solid food to stay in the stomach is around 2 hours. If you take them together with a tablet, okay, it will actually delay the arrival of the tablet in intestine, okay. This will subsequently reduce absorption, okay. I would say delay or reduce the absorptions. Okay, how it delay the absorption is simply because you take a longer time for the drug to stay in the gastric, longer time in gastric, in the stomach, okay, before they can enter to the intestine. So you delay the absorption. But how they reduce the extent of the absorption? Okay, let's say if you in the intestine, okay, this is an intestine layer, this is also intestine layer, okay, you can actually, in normal condition when there's no food, okay, so you deliver the drug very quickly. Let's say now you have six molecules here, and in normal condition they can deliver 3 molecules per second, okay. But when you have food, the arrival of the drug molecule into the intestine has been delayed, so they come slowly, maybe 2 by 2. So in the first second they arrive only 2 of them, so you will just absorb 2 molecules per second, okay. and then later on you have another 2, okay, and slowly so on and so forth, but the rate has been reduced. If the rate has been reduced, means the extent of absorption at a time point is actually reduced. Okay, so food can affect the rate of gastric emptying. Okay, how they affect? They increase the what you call gastric residence time. Okay, fatty food can slow gastric emptying and retard the drug absorptions. Okay, and sometimes the extent of absorption is reduced, like what I've explained just now. Okay, and occasionally the absorption may be improved when you have fat soluble compound as your drugs. Okay, imagine when you take the food, okay, this is the intestine, and you ingest the food. Okay, when the food move from here down near to somewhere in the pancreas and duodenum, okay, an enzyme will be released, which is bile salt. And bile salt is an emulsifying agent, okay, and it can emulsify fat in the presence of water. Okay, so if you have anything that any compound that is fat soluble, okay, and they can easily emulsify by the bile salt release, okay, while digestion, means the food digestion mechanism actually help, okay, in emulsify the drugs. Okay, when they have emulsified the drug become smaller, and the size is good for absorption. Okay, so occasionally the absorption may be improved when you have any fat soluble drug compounds. So some of the medication, usually they are meant to be taken with food. So if you still remember some of your supplement that they are packed in a soft gel capsule, because the ingredient in the soft gel capsule is mainly oily phase. So if you will be advised to take the supplement with food, because you will have the bile salt that they can emulsify your supplement content and easy for absorptions. This is the example of the drugs that involve in the effect of food on their absorptions. So the drug that will experience a reduce in absorption after it is taken with food include ampicillin, aspirin, atenolol, captopril, and so on and so forth. So since they have reduced in absorption, so usually you take after before meal, all right, or you take with empty stomach, all right. And anything that delay the absorption, okay, for example Panadol, paracetamol, acetaminophen, aspirin, okay, diclofenac, digoxin, furosemide, nitrofurantoin, all of this, their absorption can be delayed due to the presence of food. Okay, and here are the example of the drugs that shows increase in absorption after they are being given with food. These include the chlorothiazide, diazepam, riboflavin, hydralazine, metoprolol, and usually these compounds are very lipophilic, fat soluble. This is example of the blood serum concentration of propranolol. Okay, fat state means the drug is taken with food. Fasted means it's empty stomach. So when the drug is given alone with empty stomach, this is the absorption, and the peak, okay, concentration, which is Cmax, is 60, and the Tmax, the time where the maximum concentration achieved, is around 3 hours. Okay, so this shows that propranolol is better to take with food for better absorptions. This is the example of the effect of food on LESCO XL. LESCO is fulvastatin tablet, and the XL, it means extended release. Okay, so when the drug is given with food, okay, here, and you can notice that the extent of absorption increase, okay, but the Tmax has been prolonged, right? And when the drug is given with empty stomach, there is a slight reduce in the Cmax and the shorter Tmax, means they achieve the maximum concentration faster. So the food can also interact with excipient, okay, especially for modified release system, and they will use the term dose dumping to describe the rapid release of the active ingredient from an extended release product into the bloodstream. So if you look at the example here, number 1, this is the serum plasma of theophylline. Okay, theophylline is used mainly for asthma. Okay, under empty stomach, fasted condition, empty stomach, the extended release and the brand, this is the brand Unifylline, and this is the experimental. Okay, it shows the same profile, almost the same profile of theophylline. However, when we compare the brand and the experimental release, experimental preparation, we saw the effect of food. Okay, this graph is after food. Okay, the effect of food will cause dose dumping to the branded drugs, okay, which is called as Unifylline. This is also an extended release preparation, but it is easily affected by food. So in this experiment, they are trying to modify or trying to change the type of excipient so that there's no interaction with food and there's no dose dumping happen, and the release profile maintained. So this is another example of the serum plasma concentration, of alpha tocotrienol, an oily compound. Okay, so you expect it is an oily compound. When you add food, you will expect an increase in absorptions. Okay, so let's look at the profile. So when it is given with food, as expected, the Cmax increase, Tmax the same. Okay, when the compound is given empty stomach, Cmax is low with the same Tmax. Okay. Okay.
So now let's talk about the third factor affecting the bioavailability of the drugs. Okay, the third physiological factor includes absorption window of a drug. So what do you mean by absorption window? When the absorption is restricted in a certain location of a GIT, okay, in this case, the formulation will be critical for optimal bioavailability. For example, what happened with metformin and artemisinin, whereby their absorption is restricted in a certain location of GIT. Okay, this is first. And second, the absorption window may be inherent to the molecule of the drugs. For example, the drugs need a certain specific transporter for passing through the membrane. Okay, so in this case, perhaps they will search for the transporter for the drugs. All right, and it can also be related to poor aqueous solubility or dissolution of the drugs that may be related to their ionization or lipophilicity. And how it's related to the ionization and lipophilicity? Okay, when we look at the different physiological pH in GI tract, it can cause different ionization and hence lipophilicity of the drugs. Okay, as we know from previous slide, the drug need to be unionized for better absorption, and it need to be lipophilic, okay, for a good absorption. So when a drug enter to, let's say, stomach, let's say a weak base, when they enter in the stomach, they will be ionized due to the low pH in the stomach. So in this case, less drug will be absorbed. Alright, and when the weak base they enter to the intestine condition, which they have the higher pH, and the unionized forms will be increased, and this will increase the lipophilicity of the drugs, okay, and hence increase absorption. So this table summarizes the average physiological pH in GI tract in fasted, okay, no food, and fat state, okay. And if you look more detail into, let's say, the stomach, in the fasted condition, we have the pH around 1.4 to 2.1, and the pH increase when there is a food present in our GI tract. And for duodenum, for jejunum and ileum, they have a higher pH, okay. And in ileum, the changes with the presence of food is slightly less, okay. So this is the effect of pH on dissolution of ketoconazole. So when the ketoconazole is given with pentagastrin, which it will reduce the pH, okay, and it absorbs better, alright. And when it is given with this one, that can increase the pH, and the absorption is reduced, okay. And these are list of drugs which exhibit a narrow absorption window in the gastrointestinal tract, okay. And if you observe, we have levodopa, p-amino benzoic acid, furosemide, riboflavins, acyclovir, biphosphonate, metformin, gabapentin, baclofen, okay, ciprofloxacin, and ovosuccin. Not to worry, you no need to remember every single drug. The important thing that you need to remember is the principle of how a drug with narrow therapeutic window can affect bioavailability. Alright? Okay, there are a few strategies that we can use for dealing with narrow absorption windows drugs. For example, we can make the modification of intestinal transit time, okay, or we can use bioadhesion excipient, for example chitosan. Okay, if you add chitosan in your formulation, okay, for example it is a tablet, and when they reach your intestine, okay, due to the swelling property of this chitosan, swelling property, and it can behave like a glue, which they can stick to the lining of the intestine, okay, and with that you will increase the transit time in intestine, okay, so this affect the transit time. All right, or we can use a gastro-retentive system. For example, that you want a low pH for a better absorption, so you will maintain the drug in stomach. All right, so in gastro-retentive system, according to that theory, the stomach has some liquid, okay, and if you have a tablet, okay, with a low density, and you put in here, and the tablet can float, okay, on the liquid, okay, and because of the swellable system, okay, they swell, become bigger. All right, and so they cannot pass through the duodenum, okay, so they will remain in the liquid of stomach, so remain in low pH. So this is intended for drug that is going to be unionized in low pH, so you will increase their absorption and eventually increase bioavailability. Okay, so gastro-retentive system can also be represented by floating system, when you have your tablet, for example, and they are made from the material that is foaming, F-O-A-M. So they have some air in the system, so they can easily float on the surface of liquid, so they can float in the stomach and not passing through the duodenum. So here is example enhancement of bioavailability of narrow therapeutic window drugs. For example, you can have floating bilayer tablets for furosemide, mucoadhesive microsphere for acyclovir, floating and swelling tablet for ofloxacin, low density floating capsule, or gastro-retentive unfolding system, for example riboflavin. Okay, and here is the result for in vivo study. You don't need to memorize each and everything, but you have to understand the concept on how they can modify the drug with a narrow therapeutic window in order to increase their bioavailability. Okay, and let's us go into the physiological factor of intestinal barrier and metabolism. So in this factor, for example, when you have your drugs, okay, here is your what do you call it? Your intestine lining wall, okay. Here's a cell like this. This is the cell, nucleus of the cell, okay. Okay, this is a cell. Okay, when your drug come in, okay, and there is a guarding system here, which is something like what you call them, P glycoprotein, okay. Usually whatever drugs that is passing through the membrane, okay, once it's detected by this protein, they will pump the drug out from the cell, so to protect your body. Okay, this is what you call the system of P glycoprotein. And there are other type of guarding system is once you go in, okay, for example, you have drug A that's going in, and they will meet the enzyme which metabolize them into inactive A, or into metabolite A, which is less active, so that it will not harm your body system. So there's two mechanisms that the body is trying to protect you, which is first by P glycoprotein, and second by the cytochrome P450 enzyme. Alright, so P glycoprotein transporter are present throughout the body, including those in liver, brain, kidney, and the epithelial in intestinal tract. Okay, they appear to be important component of the drug absorption, as they act as a reverse pump, okay, to inhibit the absorption. And this is an active ATP dependent process which they can have a significant effect on drug bioavailability. Okay, so what is the key point for P glycoprotein? They are reverse pump, okay, that inhibit bioavailability, and they use they are active, which is ATP dependent, okay, and they appear in throughout the body. Okay, and example of substrate for PGP include digoxin, so cyclosporin, fexofenadine, paclitaxel, tacrolimus, nortriptyline, and phenytoin. Okay, so this is the schematic for P glycoprotein. For example, when you have the drug, this is the drug here, and here your intestinal wall, okay, when your drug already go in and detected by the PGP, it will be pumped out, okay, outside the cell, so to protect your body. Okay, so when you have a drug that they can inhibit, okay, they can saturate, for example, the PGP, so they are called PGP inhibitor. Okay, for example, you have a drug A that is the inhibitor, okay, so there's a A inhibitor going in, and there will be a substrate for PGP and they will sit on the PGP, and concurrently when you give the B, okay, so the B can be escaped. Okay, so A is PGP inhibitor, so end up you will have more of B, so bioavailability of B increase. So beside the PGP that can affect bioavailability, as I mentioned in the previous slide, that the enzyme can also metabolize the active drug, which affect the outcome of bioavailability, which is cytochrome P450-3A4. Cytochrome P450-3A4 is a member of the cytochrome P450 mixed function oxidase system. In the intestine, it plays a role in metabolism of a certain drug. Okay, for example, when you have, this is the cell of your intestine, okay, and when your drug coming in, when they pass through the membrane, okay, and the enzyme of cytochrome P450-3A4 enzyme will metabolize the drug into metabolite, okay, and this metabolite will go into the blood. Okay, if the drug being metabolized into inactive metabolites, then you will have the reduce in bioavailability. However, if you have the drug that metabolize into active drug, then of course you will have an increase in bioavailability. Okay, and this is the summarized schematic of the influence of PGP, okay, and cytochrome P450. So if you are asked about how physiological factor of the PGP and CYP3A4 affect bioavailability, this is the best diagram to present. Okay, so when you have a drug come in, okay, it will be pumped out as a reverse pump, or it will be metabolized into metabolite, okay, and absorbed into the bloodstream as an active drug compound. So the implication of PGP and CYP3A4 explain the erratic bioavailability of molecule, even though they has been formulated with desired physicochemical properties. Okay, for example, when you have drugs that you already optimize the physicochemical property, but after you have given it to like 5 different patients and you still see the difference in bioavailability, possibly because of the different quantity of PGP and CYP3A4 appear in that present in the body of the different patients. Okay, and other implication will be if you have a drug with active ingredient and formulated with excipient, and so happen that the excipient are substrate of PGP and CYP3A4, and this can also affect bioavailability of the drugs. Okay, and besides that, there are food that can actually inhibit CYP3A4. Okay, let's say there is a drug that is a substrate for CYP3A4, for example, you need to take 100 mg in order to achieve achieve the therapeutic level. Okay, but you have been taken the food which inhibit the CYP3A4, then you may have the drug increase in bioavailability. Okay, and some other herbal product, for example St. John wood, they induce CYP3A4. When they induce CYP3A4 and they can metabolize an active drug into inactive metabolites, then it can reduce the bioavailability of the active ingredient. Okay, so compound from herbal drugs may be substrate. For example, as I said just now, the St. John wood, which they reduce the plasma concentration of cyclosporine because they induce the CYP3A4. So you have less active cyclosporine, okay, digoxin, amitriptyline, warfarin, indinavir, theophylline, and oral contraceptive. And imagine if you have reduced in oral contraceptive, and then it may cause the OCP inactive. Okay, another example is garlic supplement, which they can reduce the plasma sample of secrinavir and antiviral drugs. Okay, you have a licorice that they increase the prednisolone level, and you have a grapefruit juice, which they are potent inhibitor of CYP3A4. So when they are potent inhibitor of CYP3A4, so you have less CYP3A4, so you have less metabolism, okay, to be inactive drug. So more active drug enter into the bloodstream. So what is the effect to bioavailability? Increase in bioavailability. So how we know whether a substance or a new chemical entity is a substrate or PGP or CYP3A4? How we know whether it is a substrate? Okay, to do this, we need to have a well-known inhibitor of PGP and CYP3A4. So we need to have a well-known inhibitor of the PGP and CYP3A4. Okay, so in this experiment, okay, a sinecytin, okay, a compound, an active compound in misacochine, okay, and we are not sure whether it is a substrate of PGP or CYP3A4, so we investigate with co-administered of ketoconazole, which is a well-known inhibitor of CYP3A4. So how we go with this? So first, in the first phase, you administered, okay, sinecytin orally without ketoconazole, and this you will have this curve, okay, and in the second phase, after the washout period, means let's say after 2 weeks, that the patient, the same personnel, the same patient, okay, the body is clear of ketoconazole, and then again we administer ketoconazole orally plus sinecytin, okay, and we see how ketoconazole can affect the blood level of sinecytin, okay, and this is what we observe after co-administered with ketoconazole. Okay, so when we look at the second curve here, so the bioavailability has increased. Okay, in this case, that we know the presence of ketoconazole affect the bioavailability of sinecytin, and yet ketoconazole is a strong inhibitor of CYP3A4, so the absorption of sinecytin is closely related to CYP3A4. Okay, when it is closely related to CYP3A4, so we hypothesize that it is a substrate for CYP3A4. Okay, so to make it clearer, so we have the case number 1 without ketoconazole. Okay, when it is without ketoconazole, that you have the sinecytin, okay, sinecytin, that they are being absorbed, okay, and when they meet CYP3A4, okay, let's say 3 go in, and when they meet CYP3A4 they become what you call metabolite, which is inactive, okay, and maybe they remain one of the synacetin, and only one going to the bloodstream. Okay, so this is the bioavailability of 1. Okay, in the second case, when you co-administer with, okay, ketoconazole, and again this is your synacetin that's come in, okay, synacetin that's go in, 3 of them, and because the CYP3A4 has been inhibited by ketoconazole, so the 3 remain active synacetin, and this active synacetin go into the bloodstream, okay, with the bioavailability of 3. Okay, so we know that actually synacetin is a substrate for CYP3A4 when we investigate the bioavailability, the absorption of synacetin without ketoconazole and with ketoconazole. So hope this is clearer for you now. Okay, and this is the influence of PGP on tocotrienol absorption. Okay, the same thing we are trying to understand whether alpha tocotrienol is a substrate of PGP. We are not sure, so we want to investigate. So how we investigate? So we use a well-known inhibitor of PGP, which is also ketoconazole, also a well-known inhibitor for PGP. Okay, so we administered the medium change triglyceride of alpha tocotrienol, medium change triglyceride, without ketoconazole, and this is the plasma concentration that we have. Okay, and when we co-administer with ketoconazole, which we already inhibit the PGP, okay, so more of the MCT can enter the cell and not being pumped out, and they can subsequently enter the bloodstream, so they have the higher plasma concentration of tocotrienol. In this case, we have identified that alpha tocotrienol is a substrate of PGP. Okay, and this is the influence of PGP on tocotrienol absorption. Okay, the same thing we are trying to understand whether alpha tocotrienol is a substrate of PGP. We are not sure, so we want to investigate. So how we investigate? So we use a well-known inhibitor of PGP, which is also ketoconazole, also a well-known inhibitor for PGP. Okay, so we administered the medium change triglyceride of alpha tocotrienol, medium change triglyceride, without ketoconazole, and this is the plasma concentration that we have. Okay, and when we co-administer with ketoconazole, which we already inhibit the PGP, okay, so more of the MCT can enter the cell and not being pumped out, and they can subsequently enter the bloodstream, so they have the higher plasma concentration of tocotrienol. In this case, we have identified that alpha tocotrienol is a substrate of PGP. Okay.